Welcome everybody. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about drones, and we're going to relate some of what we're going to talk back to operating drones around boats and stuff like that. I'm going to go through the full spectrum of things. So let's get started. So the first thing, a little bit about myself. I'm a professional drone operator. I'm relatively new to this. I used to be in large aviation for a long time. I'm doing this now. So I fly things like this, which is a DJI M300 RTK, which is a large drone. It's about the size of a coffee table, and we use it for professional and industrial services like inspecting wind turbines and other tall, high-value assets. We can do all sorts of bits and pieces with it, so that's what I do. I'm also a committee member on the UAAI, so in that role, I kind of contribute as much as I can to drones in Ireland and how it plays out in the regulations and all that sort of thing. We're this sort of body that represents amateur and professional drone pilots to the IAA and to anybody else who cares about drones. I was the first person in the country with the new specific category authorization under the new EASA regulations. I will be going into exactly what that is. So I trade under Engineers with Drones, MECV, which is a wind turbine specialist inspection company, and that's the UAAI logo then as well. So tonight we're going to be talking about drones and their applications. So what can you do with them? It's an interesting concept to think about what can be done with them. I'll relate why in a moment. We're going to look at the regulations in Ireland, so what you can and cannot do there. We're going to look at some basic and advanced drone flying techniques, and then looking at drone operations around boats specifically, and a little bit more in between. So let's get started. Sorry there. So let's get started. First thing I want to talk about is, what is a drone? There seems to be sometimes a little bit of confusion about what it is. Anybody who has had a model aeroplane of some description may believe that a drone is an extension of that, but comparing a drone to a model airplane is like comparing your iPad to a pocket calculator. They are very different things. They're not the same at all. A drone is best conceptualized as a very, very smart, intelligent brain, like a computer or a phone or whatever, coupled to a camera typically, and then you put some propellers on it so that it can move in three-dimensional space. So what you have is the ability to place this high quality camera and brain in three-dimensional space. And we will see now why that is so important as we go through the applications, or why that's so useful, more importantly. So looking at the applications, what do we got? Photography is the big one. It's the one that I think most people are familiar with when it comes to drones. So the ability to place a camera very easily and in a place that would otherwise be very inaccessible, and maintain it in that place. So traveling along next to a boat. If you want to do that 20 years ago, you're talking about a helicopter and nothing else, or a very, very tall boat right next to you. You know, that's the only way of getting that shot any other way. Nowadays, not a problem with a drone. The drone goes up, it flies alongside a boat or anything like that. We use this for aesthetic photography, which is, I think, primarily what most people here tonight might be interested in, but also technical photography, like inspecting wind turbine blades, telecommunications towers, water towers, the roofs of buildings, you know, all sorts of stuff. There's a myriad of reasons we might use the camera in a drone. The next one would be videography. So basically an extension of the photography. The ability to place that drone and record a video of whatever's happening with that drone. As John rightly said, the drone quality these days, the camera quality on drones these days, even the DJI Mavic Mini, which is about the size of an iPhone, is a 4K camera in there. A very high quality camera. You know, the camera is usually probably one of the most expensive and high quality aspects of any given drone you're going to purchase. So that's videography, and again, a myriad of uses for that, both aesthetic and practical. Next one after that is FPV. The FPV world are the true artists of the drone world, in my opinion. These are the people who can truly fly drones as opposed to operating a drone. If the FPV people were real pilots, they would be the people in fighter jets or in aerobatic planes. They really know what they're doing when it comes to on the sticks controls of a drone. Why would you, just to quickly describe FPV first, so first person view, the goggles that you see this person wearing here, what he sees, the drone, he sees what the drone looks at. And when you put yourself into that deep immersive perspective, it's a lot easier to fly the drone in a very accurate, precise way, which means you can fly, like this person is here through a warehouse, through all sorts of gates and grids in a sort of racing situation. You can fly very close to land and cliffs, and you can move the drone in a very precise manner when you are an FPV pilot, when you are a good FPV pilot. The path to being a good FPV pilot is a lot of crashing between 0 and when you get that good. I would highly recommend after this talk that you Google something, what I would call cinematic FPV, to see what these artists can really do when they get going. There's some beautiful examples of the true capability of drones in terms of how you can move them through the sky, move them in 3D space, and the videos that they can make. So that's FPV. We use them for displays. So every light you see there is a drone. These are very much controlled from a central brain, and then all the drones fly. A lot of these are done by Intel, the chip company. But very much the idea that a drone isn't just a model aeroplane, it's not a model helicopter, it's very much a brain with some propellers attached. And this sort of thing is where you very much see that in action. Orthomosaics is another thing that drones are very good at producing. So orthomosaic fundamentally is you take an awful lot of images of the ground and you stitch them all together to get a very, very high resolution image. So very useful in like constructions, land surveying, all that sort of thing. Google Earth is fundamentally a large orthomosaic. That's a great example of it. It used a satellite to do the same thing, but the drone will get you a much higher resolution version, much closer to the ground. Photogrammetry. This is a big thing that drones are being used for these days. Photogrammetry is quite an old technique. I think it was developed pre-World War I even, maybe. Fundamentally, if you know the position of a camera in space and you know the quality of the lens, and you are able to position that camera in space relative to the photographs, and then find common objects in the photographs, like the same tree in a lot of different photographs, you can then make 2D and 3D models based just on imagery. So it was used a lot in the World War I and II to make accurate aerial maps just by flying quickly over a space using an aeroplane. Nowadays, I can take my drone, I can fly it in a specific pattern around an object like a castle or something like that, and produce a photorealistic 3D model of that castle afterwards. So this is a big thing, generating digital twins of high value assets like telecommunications towers or old structures like castles and whatnot to track issues over time and stuff like that is a very big deal. You know, why bring your entire team to the asset, which can be expensive, when you can bring the asset to your entire team? You can click anywhere on that castle and measure how wide a rock is or how big a wall is or any of that sort of thing. There's a lot of stuff can be done with photogrammetry. It's an emerging, well, it's not an emerging, but it's emerging from the drone perspective what is truly possible with this technology. LiDAR, another big one that is used on drones. So fundamentally, you take a laser, you spin it really fast, you get a way of catching the bounces back. So very much like radar. LiDAR uses light instead of radio waves. What you get is what's called a point cloud. So you can see millions of different points where the laser reflected back to you. And those points are quite accurate. So for instance, in this lower image here, if I was somebody who was interested in the health of these wires, I could send my drone right down the length of wires for, let's say, 50 kilometers, collecting LiDAR imagery. I can then click on the wire and click on the closest tree and say, that tree is 2 meters from that wire. That's too close. I need to get the guys who cut down trees in and go along and trim all the trees. Or I could click it and say, it's 5 meters. That's okay. I don't need the guys about the trees for another year or two. So LiDAR is a fantastic technology. It exists on airplanes. It does all sorts of stuff outside of just the drone world, but in the drone world is very useful. One of the key qualities of LiDAR is it's able to penetrate vegetation. So as you can see up here in this image, you can get a true representation of what the land is underneath the vegetation, which is very useful for land surveying, all that sort of thing. It used to be LiDAR units were up in the millions of euros range, and you'd have to couple that to another €1,000,000 worth of aircraft in order to get this imagery. Now, maybe 30, 40K will get you LiDAR imagery from a drone that you can use in survey quality data. So very useful. Thermography, another thing that is, very much becoming commonplace. I think there was 2 incidents in the last week where Irish Coast Guard and maybe Irish Civil Defence used a drone with thermography to locate a missing person and direct the emergency services onto that person using their bird's eye view of the heat image of that person, and they were able to direct that person, the emergency services, to find that person, extract them from danger using thermography. So very, very useful thing. Again, it used to be you needed a lot of helicopter and a lot of electronics and €1,000,000 worth of FLIR camera. Nowadays, a drone will do pretty much the exact same thing. Another thing we can use thermography for is virtually peering inside objects. So this is a wind turbine blade, and I'm able to see delamination damage with the thermographic camera because the delaminated sections cool off faster than the other sections, and therefore I get variation in the surface, and I can detect that with a thermographic camera. Another one, multispectral cameras. Multispectral cameras are fundamentally, I think it's green, red, and near infrared. And what these are used for, they are able to look at plants, see how much light is being reflected in those 3 spectrums, and that allows them to tell the health of a plant. So why would you want to do that? So first of all, for scientific reasons, you might just want to know, how healthy is a forest or something like that, or how healthy is the forest this year next to next year. But a big use would be like, I can fly my drone over a field of a crop. If I see that it's mostly healthy except for this one section, then I'll only fertilize that one section. Again, a job that can be conducted with a drone. So you've saved, instead of fertilizing an entire field on spec, now you only fertilize the part of the field that needs it and everything else is good. You save money, you save the environment, and so on and so forth. So multispectral cameras are all about plant health, precision agriculture, ecological observations, forest stocks, all that sort of good stuff. And then finally, the myriad of other uses for a drone. So on the left here, you can just see this is what's called a tethered drone. So it's powered from the ground, but is flying. There's basically a giant extension lead running to the ground, and they're just de-icing these blades up in the Nordic countries, removing the ice from the blades. Something that would require, a large lifting platform, no longer needed. The drone does the job. Here you're seeing a precision agriculture drone. So this is a drone that's spraying some crops. And here, this is something I came across recently, is a fishing drone. I think it's cheating personally, but you take your hook on your rod, you leave the reel go, and the drone flies the hook out over the surf. You look for fish where the fish are. You can see down into the water with the drone. When you see the fish, you drop the hook, and then you wait for the fish to grab, and then you reel them in. So there is a drone used for everything. Other uses will be things like, imagine a lifeguard on a big beach has a drone with a flotation device attached to the bottom. So the lifeguard might take 5 minutes to get out beyond the surf to a victim. In this case, the drone is out there. 30 seconds later, they're able to drop a life jacket down to the person, and off they go. Like the uses of drones, if you asked a person in 1995 what is possible with the internet, they would say it's good for sending an email. But now we see the myriad of uses. Drones are at that stage right now. What is possible with a drone? We don't even know, because there's so many unthought of uses for them. And what I'm showing you now is just a small sample of what is actually possible. So that is all of the current applications, or the current, let's say, payloads. There's a whole load more, like deliveries we were talking about earlier with John there, and many other, but that's applications. Going to move on to the regulations next. So this very much pertains to regulations within Ireland and Europe. So I'm hoping this might be useful for you. So the first thing is, who sets the regulations? In Ireland, as a member of the EU, a crowd called EASA, the European Aviation Safety Agency, they set the rules for all of aviation within the European Union. If you're in the EU, you got to take their guidance on regulations. And they'll set everything from hang gliders to 747s to drones. Yeah, if it flies in Europe, these guys are the people you need to talk to. They direct the national aviation authorities, in this case the IAA, how to, or the IAA take their cues from them, and the IAA implement those regulations in Ireland. If you're in the UK and Northern Ireland, it is the CAA, the Civil Aviation Authority. Quick note, Brexit means that the UK use nearly identical regulations, but a completely separate system. I can take my Irish license and go to France and it'll work, and it's usable there and it's all good and they'll recognize it. I cannot go to the UK and do the same thing, and I cannot go to Northern Ireland and do the same thing. However, to gain a UK license is not that big a deal. If anybody's familiar with gaining the Irish license, it's a very similar situation. They've pretty much mirrored the regulations, they just gave everything a slightly different name. When do I actually need to get certified? When do I need to go and get some form of license if I want to fly a drone? There's two broad rules you need to follow. If the flying machine has a camera of any description, no matter what its weight, size, whatever, you need some sort of certification. It's not allowed in the sky without that. Even if it was bought in Smith's Toys for 10 euros for your kid, if it has a camera, you must have a license to fly it. Or if it weighs over 250 grams. So you will hear some people say, well, it doesn't have a camera, therefore it's okay. Well, if it weighs over 250 grams, it must have it. Or you say, well, it's under 250 grams, it doesn't need a license. If it has a camera, it must have a license. The other thing is, and this may seem simple, but a lot of people don't realize it, if you're only flying indoors, you don't need a camera. And the IAA have stated, look, we deal with things that fly in the sky. If you're flying in your living room, we just don't care. So if you're flying outdoors and or it has a camera, or if it's over 250 grams, you need to go and get some sort of certification. Not a hard thing to do. The link on how to do it is right there. That's where you'll figure out everything you need. So let's look at how to get certified, or what certifications are available. So the big one is what's called the open category. Excuse me there a moment. So this is where most people will fall in terms of certification. The open category is, I wouldn't say it's the amateur category, because a lot of professionals can operate under this category too, but it's certainly the category where most people sort of can operate safely, and they don't need much more than this. So it's all about low risk operations. All of the drone regulations are built around risk. I'll talk about that in a moment. So the open's low risk operations. There's three subcategories, A1, A2, and A3. I'll talk about those in a second. You can never fly anything bigger than 25 kilograms in the open category. So just so as you know, this is a pretty standard Mavic. Oh, you guys can't see it. There it is. No, it's not coming up. Sorry. Pretty standard Mavic drone. It's about 1 kilo. Yeah. A larger Phantom drone that's maybe 1.5 kilos. And the Mavic Mini is 250 grams. So 25 kilos is very big. My biggest drone is 9 kilograms. Yeah, and that's big. That's like considered a large drone. So 25 is not a big issue. You can only fly visual line of sight. So if you cannot see the drone with the naked human eye, then you are in breach of flying in the open category. You must always keep the drone in what's called VLOS, visual line of sight. You can pretty much never fly above 120 meters. I'll go into the details on that in a moment, but pretty much 120 meters is your max height no matter where you are in Europe. And you can never drop a payload, so nothing can be dropped from the drone. That is not possible. Also, you must have the operator's registration number on the drone when you fly it. So there is a guy on Etsy, does really nice little decals. I think if you type in drone decals Etsy, you'll find him straight away. He does lovely little decals where he'll print up all your decals for your drone. They'll stick really well to the drone. I think it's like 10 euros or something like that. So nice little tip for you there. He's got a great little industry going for himself. So that's the open category. So let's take a quick look. Well, first of all, I want to talk about a very important concept in the EASA regulations that pertains to drones. It's what we call uninvolved persons. And this is something that I was relating to John when you were looking at the Liffey flying the drone at the Liffey event there a few months ago. The uninvolved person is a big deal in the EASA regs. An uninvolved person is a person who is not participating in the UAS operation or who is not aware of the instructions and safety precautions given by the UAS operator. Another and simpler way of saying that is uninvolved persons are Joe Public. Anybody who isn't directly involved with you while you're doing your thing. Yeah, very important concept, and we'll see why now in a moment. So let's look at the three different categories you can be under in the open category. Open A1. I'm going to summarize all these for you in very simple terms. Open A1 is small drones that can kind of be near people. Okay, that's what it is. Open A1 is small drones that can maybe be near people. So drones that weigh less than 500 grams. Okay, so your Mavics and stuff like that probably won't fall into that. They're about 900 grams. You can fly over uninvolved persons, but it should be absolutely minimized. So you can fly over Joe Public, but it must be minimized. You can never fly over crowds, and there is minimal training required. So just online training to just get your certification. I think it takes an hour or two or something like that. Nothing much else required. So that's the open A1 category. So small drones close to people. The open A2 category, so medium drones that are fairly close to people, yeah? So drones about 2 kilograms or less, so that's your Phantoms, your Mavics, all that sort of size of drone, all are coming in under this one. But you must stay 50 meters from uninvolved people. Now, it happens to be that the Liffey at the Samuel Beckett Bridge is about 100 meters wide, so long as you're flying straight down the middle of the Liffey, technically you are allowed to fly a 2 kilogram drone in this in that space. You know, that is allowed. There's no flight over crowds, and there is significant training required. Yeah, that is to say, you must go and find a training organization. You must do a course with them. It'll cost you a couple of €100, and then you get your open A2 category ticket, because it is of a higher risk. You're flying some massive drone and you're flying it somewhat near people. Okay, and then the last one, the open A3, is for the big stuff, 25 kilo drones and under. So I actually conduct an awful lot of my operations under this particular category because I am quite far from people, but I also have a large drone. So big drones far away from people is open A3. You're never allowed to fly over or near uninvolved persons with these drones. You must be 150 meters from built up areas of any description, be they commercial, residential, or anything like that. Never flying over crowd, but it's the same certification level and the same training level as the A1 category. That is to say, it's just a little bit of online work and off you go. You know, nothing major at all. So the major training in the open category comes in the A2. The A1, A3 are usually grouped together because it's really small drones close to people and really large drones far away from people. And as you can see, it's all about how close you are to people is how the regulations are written. That's what they care about. That's what they care about. So that's the open category. Those are the three subcategories within it, and that's how they sort of fall in place. I would suspect 99% of people in the world are going to be flying in the open category, and they're pretty much going to be more than happy with it. There are instances where you might not be happy with that, and that's mostly based around the fact that open category pilots are not allowed to fly in certain airspace. We'll look at that in a moment. Just to quickly touch then on the other two major categories, there's one open category, there's the specific category. So the specific category is all about medium risk operations. So these delivery drones and stuff like that. I have the specific category for commercial drone work. I would be allowed to fly in restricted airspace, close to airports, things like that. So anything that doesn't fall into the open category automatically goes into the specific category. If you're flying it, you need an operations manual, you need all sorts of risk assessments, there's heavier training and certification, there's accountable people. It's basically like a mini little airline, you know, it's very much similar concepts there. And then the last one is what's called the certified category. This is very much a future category. So this is very high risk ops. So it's basically flying people or dangerous goods over populated areas. So anybody who sees something about, you know, the future is flying cars, and blah, 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 they will be flying in the certified category. It's basically proper large aviation. It just happens to be in the form of a drone. So next, let's look at where we can actually fly, especially in Ireland. So the first thing is broadly speaking, you are not permitted to fly in a number of different places. The obvious ones being around airports, military installations. The OPW have a blanket order that says you are not allowed to fly around any site. So, for instance, I can't go to the Rock of Cashel and start flying my drone around there, or I can't go to, Leinster House or something like that. That's just not allowed. You're not allowed to fly in those places. Some of that is more about the nuisance of drones than it is about the security, but that is the case. There's no flying there. Bird sanctuaries, not allowed there. They have just basically said no, and one can see why. Things like prisons, you can't fly over prisons. I saw a wonderful Waterford Whispers article a few months ago that said, it was a satirical article that said, choosing the best 3 drones for dropping drugs into prisons. Here they are for you. It was quite brilliant. And then things like GAA grounds. The GAA have a blanket order as well that says you are not allowed to fly a drone over any GAA ground in Ireland. I think that's to stop people looking at matches in Croke Park and stuff like that. So if you want to know from the horse's mouth exactly where you can and cannot fly, you can go to the IAA. If you go to their general aviation section, there's a drone section. In there is a file that says UAS geographic zones, and it tells you exactly where you can and cannot fly. And this, as I said, is from the horse's mouth. There is an easier to read alternative. There's 2 of them, in fact. So at this address, airspace.flyright.com or safedrone.ie/airspace map, or just Google drone map Ireland, and they'll give you these maps, and you can click on all the various areas and it tells you exactly what is and isn't allowed. So you can see here, Donegal Airport is in the open category. Flying is absolutely prohibited. So no one in the open category in any way, shape or form can take off with the drone in that entire red circle. Yeah. I will come back to what is actually allowed and not allowed in all of these in a moment, especially around the bigger ones in Ireland and what the future of that will be. But yeah, that is the case. And you can click on all of these and it'll tell you what you're allowed and not allowed to do on those 2 links there. They'll tell you exactly what it is. Remember though, somebody has generated this based on the IA data, so it may not be 100% accurate. They probably are, and a lot of people use them, but it is not, as I said, from the horse's mouth. Let's look quickly at some of these restrictions, because some of them are kind of ridiculous. This is Waterford. The little green square there is the entirety of the grounds of Waterford Airport. I know this because I spent quite a bit of time there when I started my aviation career. You are not in any way, shape or form ever allowed to take off with a drone in any way, anywhere along Waterford Harbour, anywhere in Waterford City, up along any of the rivers. As you can see, it's quite a significant zone. That is, no drones are allowed to fly in any of that space anytime. If you take off with a drone in your garden and go up to 5 meters, technically that is against the regulations. Yeah, so as you can see, it's quite restrictive. Now, I will say that the Dublin airport was redone recently. That's to say, they redid all the zone regulations for drone flying around Dublin, and all of the regional airports are currently undergoing the same review process because they are aware this is quite ridiculous. Like the fact that you can't even take off anywhere in Waterford City is insane. But anyway, they are being done. But just to be aware that that is what the regulation actually states right now about Waterford. Here's a look at the Dublin map. So just for your info real quick, the yellow section in the open category, so most typical pilots, you're only allowed up to 30 meters high. Now, 30 meters is quite a lot. It'll easily get you a nice shot of your house, things like that. And in the green zone, you are allowed up to 90 meters high, 90 meters high. In the red zones, again, if you're in the open category, you do not have specific category authorization, you are not allowed to take off in any way, shape or form in any of those red zones. As you can see, they're primarily around some form of sensitive infrastructure or some form of aviation thing, like Beaumont Hospital is where the helicopter lands, therefore there's a zone around that, things like that. Let's take a quick look at the detail of Dublin there. So as you can see for the Liffey cruise, for instance, you're in the amber zone, so again 30 meters high, not a problem. If you had like a Mavic Mini, a small 250 kilo drone, there is no problem to fly up to 30 meters with the open category up and down the Liffey there, not an issue. If you are out at Hoth, you can go up to 90 meters up and around Hoth, provided, of course, you're not near people. Same Dunleary, things like that. So, you know, there is somewhat some leeway within Dublin. They've given it some consideration. There is the ability to fly a drone at some level around the city. Again, so long as you're not breaking all the other rules, but that's what is possible. So another question then will be, how high can I actually fly? What is actually allowed? It very much depends on the airspace restrictions. As we've just seen, you could have a 30-meter restriction, a 90-meter restriction, things like that. But in the open category, you're allowed to fly up to 120 meters off the ground under you. So vertically off the ground under you. If you're on the side of a mountain, wherever you're standing, you're up 120 meters from that. Apologies, that's not true. Wherever the drone is located, it's 120 meters above the drone, not where you're standing. If you are close to an object, though, if you are close to an object and you have the permission of the owner, you can actually go above 120 meters. So if there was a large radio mast and somebody said, you can fly over the radio mast, I don't mind, then you can fly up to 15 meters above that object. So a building is another example if you want to go higher than that. Now, I would say, like, for instance, the Poolbeg chimneys are 207 meters high. The Elysium in Cork, 71 meters high. The Samson cranes in Belfast will be 106 meters high. So that gives you a rough idea of the sort of heights that the drones might fly in. 120 meters will give you a lot of, you know, it'll give you a pretty awesome view of the world with drones. So it doesn't need to be much more than that. So that's how high we can fly. Let's quickly look, based on what we've learned there about the regulations and all that, on planning. So very quickly, I would suggest anybody who's going flying, John has given us a great app there, drone weather, UAV weather, I think it's called.
UAV, yeah.
Thank you very much, John. Yeah, fantastic drone for checking the forecast. You want to quickly look at what airspace you're going in, so you can do that using the maps I've provided there. Obviously checking your equipment to make sure it's all good, and coordinating with any involved persons. So for instance, if I were flying a drone over the Liffey event, I would just make sure everybody at the event knows that there's a drone flying, not to worry about it at small. If they do think they're in danger, then to steer clear of it in some way, shape or form, and make the people around you involved persons as opposed to uninvolved persons. That allows them to partake or to be under your drone in a safe manner. Let's quickly look at what is possible if we ignore these regulations. That is what is possible. On the top there, that's the wing of a Cessna traveling at cruise speed, and that is a Phantom 3, I think it is. The Phantom 3 basically punctures into that leading edge of that wing and disappears into the wing. That's how much power and how much energy is imparted from a 1.5 kilo drone into a wing of an aeroplane. That's the radome of the 737. The drone punctured into that completely. And this helicopter here, I don't know if you can see that hole in the windscreen of the Jet Ranger there. That was a Mavic Mini did that. That's a drone that's about twice the weight of your mobile phone, maybe less. Yeah. That actually impacted the co-pilot, and let's just say if it hit the pilot, that helicopter would be in a much worse state. So even the tiniest of drones can do a lot of damage when they come into contact with airplanes. It's just the energies involved, the kinetic impact is insane. So yeah, just be truly aware of where you're flying, especially in manned aviation circumstances. That's everything on the regulations. I'm going to leave it at that. I'll be taking questions on these later anyway, if anybody has any questions, but that's everything on the regulations, what you're allowed and not allowed to do. One thing I would say, well, two things I would say. The general knowledge of drone regulations in Ireland is extremely poor. Most people don't seem to know what is allowed and not allowed in drone regulations, okay? There's two ways of looking at drone regulations: what you're allowed to do with a drone, and then very much the GDPR side of things, that is to say, what you're allowed to look at with the drone. So for instance, I'm technically allowed to take off on any land, public land that is, or my own land, and fly over most any other land, so long as it's not breaking some other law. However, if I fly over it with the intent of photographing it or in photographing people, I'm very much in breach of a whole other bunch of regulations about GDPR and whatnot. So it's just good to be aware of the overall picture. I would also say that almost all Gardaí you will ever meet will have no clue about what the drone regulations are. Not their fault. It's very much an IAA communication issue. By all accounts, the UK police are very well informed, and at the low rank level, they're very informed about drone regulations. But at the moment, the Gardaí are not. So you may get told you're not allowed to do something that I've told you explicitly you can do here. That's just the way it is, I'm afraid. There's way more people in Ireland flaunting the regulations, and I would say flaunting, I mean they just don't know about them, or they're not aware of them, than there are who actually follow the regulations. So there's a large enforcement issue, let's say, in Ireland at the moment that may change into the future as drones become more and more prevalent, but for now, that is the way. Okay, so let's